7 years, that's how long Jessica and I had been married, long enough to know her routines, her little quirks the way. She twisted her ring absent-mindedly when she was thinking, long enough to know when something was wrong. First, I brushed it off. Changes happen in a marriage, right? People go through phases, work stress, family problems, just then, natural ebb and flow of life together. That's what I told myself anyway. But as the weeks passed, I couldn't ignore it anymore. Jessica wasn't just distant, she was absent. Even when she was right in front of me. It started with the little things. She stopped texting me during the day. We used to check in, just short, sweet messages. Hope your meeting went well, or thinking about you, love you. But those texts became fewer and fewer until they disappeared altogether. She started working late more often, a couple of extra hours here and there, turned into whole evenings gone. Big project at work. She'd say they need all hands on deck. I wanted to believe her, I really did, but then there were the other things, the small undeniable shifts. She used to greet me at the door with a kiss. Now I was lucky to get a tired smile before. She retreated to the bedroom. Our late-night conversations, the ones where we'd lie in bed and talk about everything and nothing, had dwindled into silence. Sherrilled away from me when she slept, a physical distance that mirrored the growing gap between us. One night, I reached out, brushing my fingers over her arm. She flinched ever so slightly, before forcing a smile. I'm just really tired, babe, she whispered. Tired. She was always tired these days. I tried not to let it get to me. I told myself that marriages go through rough patches, that maybe she just needed space, but then something happened that I couldn't explain away. One Friday night, Jessica came home late, later than usual. I was half asleep on the couch when I heard the door creak open. I glanced at the clock, 1:47 a.m. She was dressed up, not just I grabbed drinks with my coworkers dressed up. Now this was different. Her hair was curled, makeup still fresh, heels in her hand. She tiptoed inside like a teenager sneaking past curfew. I sat up, rubbing my eyes. You're home late? She froze for half a second before smiling. Yeah, sorry, lost track of time with the girls. Something didn't sit right. I watched as she slipped past me, heading toward the bedroom. That's when I caught the scent, cologne, a distinctly masculine cologne. That wasn't mine. My stomach twisted. Jess, I called after her. She stopped in the hallway but didn't turn around. Yeah. I hesitated, my throat dry. You smell different. She laughed, but it was forced though, probably from the bar. You know how crowded those places get. She disappeared into the bathroom before I could say anything else. A moment later, I heard the shower running. I sat there for a long time, staring at the empty hallway. That was the night I stopped pretending everything was okay, because deep down, I knew something was wrong. The next morning, Jessica was already up before me, which was unusual. On weekends, she loved to sleep in, curled up under the covers, until I brought her coffee. But today, she was in the kitchen, fully dressed, sipping from her mug. Like she had somewhere to be. Morning, I said, watching her carefully, as I poured my own coffee. Morning, she replied, flashing me a quick smile before glancing at her phone. I leaned against the counter. Late night, she barely looked up. Yeah, I told you we lost track of time. She was acting normal, but that was the problem too. Normal too rehearsed. I sipped my coffee. Where you guys go? She hesitated, just a beat too long. Just the usual places, the lounge near Kelly's place. Then we went downtown for a bit. Which lounge? I asked casually. She looked up then, and I saw something flicker across her face, annoyance maybe, or hesitation. Why? I shrugged, just making conversation. Jessica sighed and set down her mug. Andrew, are you mad that I went out? No, because it kind of feels like you're interrogating me. I forced a chuckle. I'm not, just curious, that's all. She relaxed a little, but I could tell she was still guarded, and I hated that. We were married. Why did a simple question feel like an accusation? I wanted to push further, but I let it go. For now, over the next week, my unease only grew. Jessica's phone never left her side. It was always face down on the table, and if it buzzed, she'd check it quickly before slipping it into her pocket. When I walked into a room, she'd minimize whatever she was doing on her screen. She started dressing differently too. It wasn't dramatic, but I noticed tighter jeans, lower necklines, perfume when she was just running errands. Then there were the nights she started working late. More often. One night I decided to call her office phone just to check. It rang 5 times before going to voicemail. A few minutes later, she texted me, "Hey babe, crazy night at work. What's up?" I stared at the message. If she was at her desk, She would have picked up, clenched my jaw. Something wasn't adding up. That's when I made the decision I needed proof. The next day, while she was in the shower, I took her phone and checked the call log. Most of the numbers were familiar, mine, her sister, her best friend, but there was one number that stood out. I didn't recognize it, and she had called it a lot late at night, early in the morning. On the days she worked late, my heart pounded as I copied the number down. I had no idea who it belonged to, but I was damn sure going to find out. I spent the rest of the day with that number burning a hole in my mind. It was everywhere: when I stared at my laptop screen at work, when I sat in traffic on the way home, when I lay in bed next to Jessica listening to her steady breathing. I needed to know who it belonged to. The next morning after Jessica left for work, I decided to do something I never thought I'd have to do. I pulled up the number on my phone and ran a reverse lookup online. Within seconds, the name popped up: Daniel Carter. The name meant nothing to me. At first, I didn't know a Daniel Carter. He wasn't one of our friends, not a coworker I'd ever heard just mentioned. But then I kept searching, and that's when my stomach dropped. Daniel Carter was Jessica's ex-boyfriend, sat there staring at the screen. My hands clenched so tightly around my phone that my knuckles turned white. This couldn't be a coincidence. Jessica wasn't just talking to someone, she was talking to him. The man she had once loved, the man she had history with. And from the sheer number of calls, it wasn't just a one-time thing. This was ongoing. I felt sick that night. I tried to act normal. Jessica came home late again, another work emergency. She kissed me on the cheek the way she always did. But it felt different. Now, like it wasn't real. Long day, I asked, watching her carefully. She sighed dramatically, dropping her bag onto the counter. You have no idea. Is where if I have to sit through one more useless meeting, I might lose my mind. She was lying. I knew it. She had no idea that I knew. For the first time, I wondered how long this had been going on. How long she'd been sneaking around behind my back, whispering into her phone, laughing for him the way she hadn't laughed for me in months. I clenched my jaw, forcing a smile. Sounds rough. She smiled back completely, oblivious to the storm raging inside me. Yeah, I'm exhausted. I'm going to shower and head to bed. I nodded, watching as she disappeared down the hall. As soon as I heard the water running, I pulled out my phone and did something I wasn't proud of. I installed a tracking app. I hated myself for it. I shouldn't have to do this. This wasn't what marriage was supposed to be. But Jessica had left me with no choice. If she wasn't going to tell me the truth, I was going to find it myself. I barely slept that night. My mind wouldn't shut off. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured Jessica smiling at her phone, whispering his name. Daniel, a name I never thought I'd have to hear again, let alone worry about. She had told me about him once years ago. It didn't work out. She had said casually we were young, and he wasn't the right guy for me. I had believed her. Now here he was, slipping back into her life, into our life, like he'd never left. And I was the idiot who hadn't seen it coming. The next morning, Jessica woke up like nothing was wrong. She hummed as she made coffee, scrolling through her phone with that little half smile she used to give me. I wanted to rip it out of her hands and see what she was hiding, but I kept my cool. She glanced up and caught me watching her. What I forced a smile. Nothing, just thinking. She grinned. That's dangerous. I almost laughed, almost. Instead, I sipped my coffee and waited for her to leave. The moment she was gone, I grabbed my phone and opened the tracking app. Her location popped up instantly. She was headed toward her office, just like she said she would be. But that didn't mean much. If she was meeting him, it wouldn't be now. It would be later, when she thought I wouldn't notice. So I waited all day. I checked the app, refreshing it every hour. She stayed at work until 600, just like usual. Then, instead of coming home, she drove across town. My heart pounded. As I stared at the screen, she had parked near a high-rise apartment building, not a restaurant. Not a bar, an apartment. I clenched my fist. His apartment. I grabbed my keys. I had told myself I wasn't going to do this, that I wasn't the guy who followed his wife around like some jealous psycho. But that was before she started sneaking around. Before she lied to my face, before I knew that every late night at work was probably just another excuse to be with him. I had to know. I got in my car and drove. The apartment complex was in an expensive part of town, too expensive for Jessica to just casually be visiting a friend. I parked down the street, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard they ached. I didn't know what I expected to see. Maybe I was shopping. She'd step out alone, proving me Wrong that she had been telling the truth, that this was all in my head. But I wasn't that lucky. Jessica stepped out of the lobby with a man, tall, confident, smiling Daniel. I knew it was him even before I saw his face. He had that look. The one guys like him always had the kind of guy who thought he could take whatever he wanted. And Jessica, she looked happy, happier than I'd seen her in months. They stood too close, their body language too familiar. Then he did it. He touched her arm. I saw red. I wanted to get out of the car and end this walk up to them. Call her out. Demand answer, ERS. But I didn't. I forced myself to stay. Put gripping the steering wheel until my hands shook, because now I had proof. No more excuses, no more doubts, no more waiting for her to tell me the truth now. I knew, and soon so would she. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel so hard. My knuckles turned white, my pulse pounded. In my ears, drowning out the distant hum of traffic. Jessica and Daniel stood outside the apartment building, locked in a conversation that looked too comfortable. I should have walked up to them, confronted them, made a scene, demanded answers, forced Jessica to explain herself right then and there. But I didn't. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing me hurt. Instead, I raised my phone, my fingers trembling, as I snapped a few photos. Jessica standing too close, Daniel leaning in, his hand brushing her lower back, and as he laughed at something she said that was all I needed. I forced myself to drive away, gripping the wheel like it was the only thing keeping me from falling apart. I barely remembered the drive home. My mind was racing in 1,000 different directions, every memory of our marriage. The night spent curled up on the couch, the mornings where she kissed me half asleep, the inside jokes that only we understood. It all felt like a lie now. By the time I pulled into our driveway, I'd made my decision. This wasn't going to be an emotional, messy confrontation. No begging, no fighting, no giving her a chance to manipulate me. Jessica had already made her choice. Now I was making mine. That night, I didn't mention anything. Jessica came home late. I suspected she smelled like perfume and cheap cologne, not mine is. Hey, she said, casually dropping her purse by the door. You still up? I glanced up from my phone, forcing a small smile. Yeah, couldn't sleep. She yawned, stretching like she had nothing to hide. I'm exhausted. Work was brutal today, liar. She leaned down and kissed me on the cheek, the same mouth that had probably kissed him hours earlier. I clenched my jaw. Go get some rest, I said, keeping my voice even. She smiled. Good night, babe. I watched her disappear down the hallway, my stomach twisting with rage. The woman I had loved for 7 years was gone. This version of Jessica, I didn't know her, and I didn't want to. The next morning I got to work. I called a lawyer. I wanted to be smart about this. I wasn't just going to throw accusations around without a plan. I wanted to know what my options were, how I could make this as clean as possible for me and as painful as possible for her. Do you have any proof? The lawyer asked. I smiled bitterly. Yeah, I have proof. I spent the rest of the day preparing. I went through our finances, pulled up every text and call log I could find, and put everything into a neat little folder. I wasn't just going to tell Jessica. I knew I was going to show her by the evening. I was ready. I placed the folder on the dining table. Next to it, I set my wedding ring, a statement. Now all that was left to do was wait. Jessica walked in around 9:30, later than usual. She looked surprised to see me sitting there, my hands folded neatly on the table. Hey, she said hesitantly. What's going on? I gestured to the folder. Go ahead, open it. She hesitated, glancing at me. Andrew, what is this? I didn't say anything. She slowly reached for the folder, flipping it open. I watched her face as she scanned the photos, the undeniable proof of her betrayal. Her breath caught. I cut her off. Don't. Her eyes snapped to mine. For the first time in months, I saw real fear in them. How long? I asked, my voice eerily calm. Andrew, how long? She swallowed hard. It's not what it looks like. I let out a cold laugh. Really? Because it looks like my wife has been sneaking around with her ex-boyfriend while lying to my face every single day. Her hands trembled as she reached for mine. Please, just let me explain. Pulled away. I don't need an explanation, I said. I already know everything. Tears welled up in her eyes. Andrew, please, it wasn't serious. It was a mistake. I shook my head. No, Jessica. A mistake is forgetting topic up the dry cleaning. A mistake is saying the wrong name. In a conversation, I leaned forward. my voice dropping. You made a choice over and over again. She broke down, covering her face with her hands. I didn't mean to hurt you, she sobbed. I stared at her, my expression blank. But you did. Silence filled the room. Finally, I stood up, sliding the folder toward her. I already spoke to a lawyer. Divorce papers will be ready by the end of the week. Her head snapped up, her face pale. Andrew, no, please, we can fix this. I let out a slow breath. No, Jessica, we can't. She reached for me, egging, but I stepped back. You destroyed this marriage, I said quietly. Now you get to live with the consequences. Her sobs filled the room as I turned and walked away. For the first time in months, I felt free. Jessica stayed at the table, sobbing into her hands as I walked away. I didn't turn back. I went into the bedroom, our bedroom, the one that no longer felt like ours, and shut the door. The weight that had been suffocating me for weeks, maybe even months, was finally starting to lift. I had done it. I had confronted her, laid it all out, and now she had to face it. But the thing about betrayal, even when you know the truth, even when you take action, it still hurts like hell. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my hands. My wedding ring was gone, sitting in that folder like a relic of a dead relationship. 7 years of love, trust, and shared memories, all leading to this. I heard Jessica moving around in the other room. Then her footsteps came closer, a soft knock. Andrew, she whispered, voice thick with tears. I didn't answer. Please, she tried again. Just talk to me. We can't end it like this. Clenched my jaw like this. What did she expect? That we just talk it out, maybe cry together, and then I'd magically forgive her? I stood up and opened the door. She looked up at me, eyes red and swollen. I know I messed up, she said, voice trembling, but I love you. I still love you. I let out a bitter laugh. You have a funny way of showing it. She wiped her face. I never wanted to hurt you. You didn't just hurt me, Jessica, I said coldly. You destroyed us. Her shoulders shook. I swear it didn't mean anything. I was just lost. I got caught up in something I shouldn't have. I folded my arms. Why him? She flinched. What, why Daniel of all people? Why go back to your ex? She swallowed hard, looking down. I don't know. B*LSH*T. She winced at my tone. Was not enough depressed? Was our life note enough? Was he better? She looked up, shaking her head furiously. No, God, Andrew. No, it was never about that. Then what was it about? She hesitated. I scoffed. Yeah, that's what I thought. She reached for my hand, but I stepped back. I couldn't do this. I wasn't going to let her touch me. Comfort me, not after everything. I'll stay at a hotel for a few days, I said, my voice flat. You have until the weekend to get your things and move out. Her breath hitched. Andrew, please don't do this. Let's try to fix it. I'll go to therapy. I'll do whatever it takes. I stared at her now. She wanted to fight for our marriage. Too late. I shook my head. We're done, Jessica. She broke down again, sobbing into her hands. I didn't stay to watch. I grabbed a bag, threw in a few things, and walked out. I checked into a hotel that night, but I barely slept. The weight of it all hit me in waves. The anger, the betrayal, the loss. I knew I had done the right thing, but it still felt like my heart had been ripped out of my chest. The next morning, I ignored the text from Jessica. She had left a dozen unread messages, all variations of please talk to me. And can we fix this? I wasn't answering. Instead, I focused on my next steps. I called my lawyer, finalized the paperwork, and started making arrangements for the house. I wasn't about to let her drag this out by Friday. I was ready. I texted Jessica one last time. I'll be home at 10. I agree. I'll be gone before. Before then, no response, but when I pulled up to the house Saturday morning, she was still there. Her car was in the driveway, her suitcase sitting by the door. She was waiting for me. I took a deep breath and stepped inside. She was sitting on the couch, hands clasped, eyes swollen from crying. She looked up as I walked in. I was hoping you'd let me say goodbye. I didn't sit down. You had all week. She exhaled shakily. I know. But I couldn't leave without telling you one last time. I'm sorry. I know that probably means nothing to you now. But I hate myself for what I did. I stayed silent. She swallowed. I loved you, Andrew. I still love you. I looked down at her suitcase. Then why wasn't I enough? She shuddered. Yes, it wasn't about you. It was me own selfish, stupid choices. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I needed you to hear that. I nodded. I hope you find whatever it is you were looking for. Tears spilled down her cheeks. She stood up, hesitated like she wanted to hug me, then thought better of it. Instead, she grabbed her suitcase, paused at the door, and whispered, "Goodbye, Andrew." Then she was gone. I stood there for a long time, staring at the empty space where she had been. The house felt different now. Quiet, hollow. I should have felt relieved, but all I felt was tired. The days that followed were strange. There was no big breakdown, no dramatic moment of clarity, just quiet. I didn't cry, didn't get drunk, I just existed. Until one day I woke up and realized I felt lighter. The grief was still there, but it wasn't all-consuming anymore. Started going to the gym, reconnecting with friends, throwing myself into work. One evening, I took off my wedding ring. Stared at it for a long time before setting it down. For the first time in a long time, I felt free.